Hi everyone, Joel Arnold from ID for Me. We're here again, episode 3. This time we're talking about how to re-engage with contacts that you've probably or perhaps lost engagement with over a number of years. Adam, we're here again. Thanks again for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So we've talked a lot about prospecting. You mentioned some things in our last episodes, active versus passive. Talk to us about how do you re-engage with people? Well, maybe give me an example of what's common and what the high performers are doing versus others that aren't.
Yeah. Look, it's a common thing in our industry where our industry is so focused on lead generation, but very few people talk about keeping those relationships and building on the relationships you've already got.
Yeah.
There's our industry is very much at the moment a culture of do social media, go and let it drop, do door knocking. And I think there's a place for that. I think if you're trying to build your patch, build your database, as we talked about in episode 1, there's a place for that. But there's also a place for nurturing the people that you've already got. And I don't believe there's enough emphasis. I'll give you an example. I think we were talking off camera. I was speaking to you about Rod, who I did some work with recently. And this is the perfect profile of what I'm talking about. Rod is a 55-year-old agent, been in the industry for 35 odd years. Rod is the nicest guy on the planet. He's just you speak to him straight away and you like him. And I did some work with Rod recently, and Rod's a perfect example of always trying to find new people. And I said to Rod, how long have you been in real estate? He said, I've been 30 odd years. I said, how many properties have you sold? He said, about 500. And I said to him, so if you've sold 500 homes, you've got 500 buyers and 500 sellers who have actually transacted with you. They know you. And I said, how many of those 1,000 people like you? And he said, probably most of them. And I'd say that's true because he's a lovely guy. And I said, so you've got almost 1,000 people who like you, trust you, and respect you. Yet you're always looking for new people. So Rod's a perfect example. And I know it might sound contradictory to what we were talking about earlier, but I don't believe Rod should be running a patch. Rod doesn't need to run a patch. Rod's also an older gentleman who's probably not going to embrace that. But one thing that I have touched on earlier is own something and make it your space. And I think for Rod, that space is his past clients. So an exercise that we've done with Rod, and we wouldn't have been able to do this without ID for Me, is Rod is now spending time, because he's lost contact with those 1,000 people. He should have spoken to them. He knows he should have kept in contact, but he hasn't. So what we're doing with Rod is now using ID for Me, putting the phone numbers of those 1,000 people in there, finding out where they live now. Do they still live in the same home? Have they sold it and moved on, which is devastating for Rod to know that he wasn't caught in. But Rod is now re-engaging with those people. He's ringing them and saying, hi, Joel, it's Rod here. I sold you a house 5 years ago. Firstly, I apologise. I should have spoken to you earlier. It's been remiss of me that we haven't stayed in touch, but I'd love to be your agent. I'm connecting now. And have you got any property plans for the future? And he's having incredible cut through by re-engaging with these people he should have been speaking with earlier.
Again, I said this, I think it was the last episode. That sounds a hell of a lot easier than prospecting.
So it's warm data. It's cold. Yeah. Warm prospecting is always better than cold prospecting.
Absolutely. What do agents say? Obviously, like, to me, this sounds like it makes perfect sense. But what are the kind of objections you get from agents when you tell them this?
Yeah, I'll tell you. It's a great question, and the answer is that most agents are very short-sighted and they're very transactional. So they're always looking for the next deal. Now, when you sell a home to someone, the chances are, and the average stay in a home in Australia is 7 to 10 years. So the chances are they're not going to transact again for 7 to 10 years. So agents are always looking for the new shiny fruit, right? The new shiny toy. Who's the next person to transact? But long-term career-minded agents know that if they constantly come in contact or communicate with these 1,000 people, and 10% of them transact every year, which is probably about right, there's going to be 100 sales a year. Not to mention the referrals that you get to someone's mum and someone's dad and siblings and friends. But so many agents are very myopic in their view, and that's why they don't communicate and stay in contact with these people. The agents that I see do this the best, they literally sell dozens of properties from people who they've already transacted with. And they have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 transactions with that same person, not to mention the referral network that they have with these people.
Yeah. What are the strategies that they can use? So, I'm assuming that if you're needing to stay in touch, what would be a couple of ideas that you could share with the audience of, well, here's a great reason to call, or here's a great time to call?
Look, it's not difficult. It's a matter of, if I've got 1,000 people in my database and I list a property in Smith Street, Melbourne today, it's a matter of bringing up through my CRM, find me everyone whose contact details I have in Smith Street, maybe calling them and saying, Joel, we've just sold a property in Smith Street. I know you own one in Smith Street. Just want to let you know that it's sold for $900,000. I may have some people who've missed out on that one. Have you had any thoughts about maybe selling yourself? Could I take some buyers through? So that is more aggressive marketing. We talked about passive marketing in the previous episode. That might be just sending some correspondence, an email or a report saying, here are all the sales for Smith Street for the last 4 months.
Yeah.
But just constantly keeping these people up to date, making them smarter than they were yesterday, giving them information that they haven't got access to.
Yeah.
And they can't access this information without us. We're pretty valuable in this.
Yeah, absolutely. If I was I put myself in the position of maybe the person that's getting the phone call, I would imagine that regular contact, I mean, it feels like it would build trust. I mean, it makes you more than just a real estate agent. I mean, do you find that when you've done this?
Yeah, look, it's a matter of building trust. It's about being the confidant, right? So it's a matter of, there's an expression I might have used it in one of our previous episodes. It's about being someone's real estate agent before they need a real estate agent. I want to be your real estate agent when you come to sell. And whether it's in 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 years, when it comes for you to sell your property, Joel, I want you to say, I'm going to call Adam. He's dating contact. He's let us know all the sales in the area. He's let us know what's happening in the market. I know him. Adam's being fantastic at keeping in contact. I'm going to call him and give him a shot.
Yeah.
It's a matter of, and I may not win the business. That's a listing presentation, which is a whole other thing, but I want to be memorable enough that you call me and give me an opportunity to at least pitch to you.
Do you think some agents struggle with that concept of this really isn't a transactional business? It is a long game.
Yeah, they do. They do. And yet if we're talking again about high performers, and when we're talking about high performers, I'm talking about the top 20%. I would say without doubt, everyone in that top 20% have got a long-term view of real estate. And those who have the long-term view, they're nurturing those people they've already got relationships with. Those relationships are stronger because they're hot and warm data rather than that cold data, which means that your fees are going to get better, which means that if these people sell with you, the trust is there, the relationship's better, your fee will probably be better, and it's a lot easier work than starting cold.
So when we're exploring the warmer leads, I'm assuming just because you may have not sold a house from someone, that doesn't preclude them from this exercise. But, we talked about people coming to open for inspections, for auctions. I'm also assuming that perhaps there's been appraisals that you've done or listing presentations.
Yep.
Even if you're not winning that business, they're still relevant, right?
Yeah, and that's where the career-minded agent has that advantage. They're doing those open for inspections. They're meeting those 50 people that we talked about in the last episode. You might come to one of my open for inspections. I might call you afterwards and you say, look, I'm not looking at moving for a few years. The best in our industry will call you again 6 months later, 12 months later. Hi, Joel. I know you said you weren't looking at movies. Anything changed for you? You're still looking at maybe doing things in 5 years. To reconnecting with those people, staying in contact with those people, rather than finding new people is so valuable. And having a tool like ID for me to be able to, before I make that call, Joel, just to be able to verify that you're still in that home, you've still got that same phone number, and giving me that information before I pick up the phone is invaluable.
Yeah, fantastic. So we help, obviously, people that are new to an area build out a database, but agents move around quite a bit. I would imagine that from time to time, they can't take the data with them. They're inheriting someone else's data. I've heard you call this orphan data. What's that?
When an agent has a database, that's IP of the company. It's intellectual property of the company. And very rarely, unless you've got an agreement with your company, do you take it with you.
Yeah.
So, for instance, if you've worked at a particular company, Joel, you might have left, you might have got out of the industry or moved on somewhere else. You had a database you were working with. You might have had a patch you were working with. I'm an incoming agent. I've just joined the company. First thing I'm going to do is say, well, can I inherit someone else's patch or can I inherit someone else's database? You'd be mad not to. I mean, you've communicated, I assume, very well with so many people over the years. Why would we want to drop them? And why would I want to start working with cold data when I can just step in and have your data? So that's called orphan data.
Yeah.
Now, the first thing that I'm going to want to do is re-engage with those people, ring them up and say, hi, John, hi, Mary, you've been dealing with Joel. Joel's moved on. He's no longer with us. I've taken over his contact list. Let me introduce myself. I'm Adam. If there's anything you need in real estate, I'm your new go-to person. Before I do that, there's a strong chance that a lot of that data might be outdated. First thing I'm going to do with ID for me, verify that information, verify the email address, the phone number, the homeowner before I call them. So at least I sound more educated as soon as I make that phone call. But, to not have ID for me, it ends up being a cold call rather than that warm or hotter call that we've been discussing.
Yeah.
It's a really, really important part of our business.
Yeah. As Adam said, whether you're new to a patch, taking over someone else's patch, or you've been managing your own territory, one of the great things that you can do is make sure that that information is still relevant and still up to date. So this is where ID for me, again, becomes really, really helpful in terms of just making sure that everything that you have in your CRM within your database is as up to date as possible. Let's use an example where you might be taking over the orphan data, as Adam said. Again, you can search multiple different ways, but you're probably going to be starting with a name, an address. We would encourage you to simply put that name in, put in the address, see what comes up. Alternatively, you might also have a phone number. You could do a reverse search on that phone number. We've showed in the last episode that if you've got someone coming in from an open home and they give you a mobile, you can do that. You can do a reverse search. Again, these are different angles that you can come at from this information. Again, when you look at this, it could be that the person's moved. It could be that you're seeing a previous address. It could also be that there's information about the address that the person's at that could give you some insight around where they may be going or what's going on. So we mentioned on the left-hand side, there's some little buttons. You can click that and you get a profile of the property. What we also have in ID for me, not just the contact data, but you can also see some listing information. You might see that the person has just recently sold that property. It could be that they've just recently bought that property. Again, there's a ton of information there that you can use to help profile the individual that you need to reconnect with. What else can you do here? So you might be able to see that there's other properties that you know of that someone's looking for. In the example where someone's just sold the property, if someone's been there for quite some time, you might just infer that maybe this is someone worth reaching out to because you've got a buyer that might be interested in that particular property that your historic contact's got. But in any case, it's a really great way to just check in on what you've got available, see whether that information is relevant and still up to date within ID for me. Again, you can also get additional information. It's very likely we'll have an alternative email or perhaps even a landline. There's a plethora of information there that's available for you. It's a great tool for verifying what you have, but it can tell you a little bit more. You might see that the property that you thought they were in, they're no longer there anymore. They're now somewhere else. It could be that they've downsized. There could be an enormous amount of things that this person may have done over the time since you last spoke with them that ID for me can fill in those gaps. Again, if we think about you're reaching out to someone that you may have not spoken to for a long time, you want to try and take advantage of any piece of information that you can that can, one, not only help you feel more confident when you're making that phone call, but also give you some relevant insight to that individual that can make that phone call go a lot easier. So Adam, I found this discussion particularly insightful as a career salesperson. I think easier the better, the longer game the better. We've heard a lot that, that it's always, I need new. This is actually saying, no, let's foster what I've already got. Let's be smart about what I've really got. But also, now that the technology's there, you can re-engage with people that you haven't spoken to in a long time. In your experience, again, the high performers do this. What's the one or two benefits that they're going to see out of this that we want everyone to know?
Yeah. If you've got a lot of people, whether they're your people, whether you've inherited those people, work the warm data, use ID for me, verify, fill in the gaps. If you haven't got emails, you can now fill in the gaps, communicate with these people en masse, become their agent before they need an agent. I guess these are really the messages of today.
Awesome. All right. Well, another insightful episode. Stay around for our next one, which is about prospecting around current listings and using data to reach out to new people and build those relationships.